Hi, and welcome back to this week's episode of Trapped by Love. I'm your host, Emma Carrington, and this podcast covers cases of domestic abuse and domestic homicide. So if this is not the kind of content you were looking for, I completely understand. Thanks for stopping by. My aim in covering these cases is to honour the victims of these crimes and to get their stories out there in the hopes of warning others who may face similar situations. So in saying that, I mean absolutely no disrespect to any of the victims or their loved ones. I've done my very best to thoroughly research these cases and to get the details as accurate as possible. The hope is that the more people who recognise the red flags and warning signs of abusive relationships, the less prevalent these cases will be in the future. Knowledge is power, and we need to know what to be on the lookout for so we can protect ourselves and each other. I'd also like to hear your thoughts, so please leave me a comment below or let me know your thoughts on Twitter at LoveTrapPod. So let's go ahead and get into this week's case. Today's case is that of Lauren Hugelmaier. Lauren was born in 1988 in Los Angeles and grew up with her parents Laurie and Dale and two sisters in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Lauren was very close with everyone in her family. She had an extremely close bond with her father, Dale, and her sister Beth. The tight-knit family were also quite religious and traditional. When Lauren was in middle school, it was at the same time as a boy named Matthew Phelps. There's no record of the two being close through their time at school together. It's more likely that they just knew of each other. Now, where Lauren's family was very tight-knit and supportive, Matthew's family was dysfunctional. While he was growing up, Matthew was primarily raised by his grandparents. His single mother was only occasionally around, and his biological father was completely absent from his life. His mother seemed not overly interested in being a mother to him, or interested in him at all. She remarried a few times, but Matthew was never able to form that father and son bond with any of his stepfathers. This flawed dynamic during such an important time in his life caused him to start acting out. When Matthew started high school, he began abusing drugs and alcohol. More specifically, Matthew and his friends would take cough and cold medication recreationally. Now, with heavy cough medicines, you're supposed to follow the directions, and taking more than the recommended dosage can cause somewhat of a high. So this was something Matthew consistently took advantage of. These behaviours took a toll on his grades, and when his addiction began to spiral, Matthew's grandparents took him out of public high school and put him into a private Christian academy to get his life back on the right track. They hoped the stricter environment would straighten him out somewhat. And this seemed to work well for Matthew. He started getting better grades in school and seemed to have significantly improved from his earlier high school years. Meanwhile, Lauren and her family had moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. This is where she finished out her high school, graduating from Swain County High School in North Carolina in 2007. She then went on to attend Appalachian State University, also in North Carolina, graduating in 2011 with a degree in business administration and management. Lauren was very intelligent. She was industrious and a determined young lady. She was said to be super sweet and very loving and a very caring friend. She was reliable and an active member of her church, where she was a big part of the youth program. Later on, when he was in his mid-20s, Matthew reached out to Lauren through Instagram. He direct messaged her. He then also went through and liked every one of the photos that she had ever posted. He was really keen for the two of them to reconnect, and as these things often go, their DMs soon became texts, then moved to phone conversations. A few months after their initial online reunion, the two began a long-distance relationship. Long distance because Matthew was still living in Kentucky and Lauren was in North Carolina. However, despite being hundreds of miles apart, Matthew and Lauren's relationship began progressing quickly. Matthew started visiting Lauren in Raleigh often and eventually moved there just to be with her. While Lauren and Matt began to fall head over heels for each other, and most of Lauren's family were supportive of the relationship, Dale, her dad, had his reservations about his daughter's new romance. Something just didn't sit right with him about Matt, and the relationship was moving a bit too fast for his liking. But he tried to keep his feelings to himself since his daughter was so happy. Eventually, though, Dale's intuition about Matt proved right when one night, while Matthew and Lauren were over at Lauren's parents' house for a game night, Matthew confessed to all of Lauren's family that he had been married before and his marriage had ended in divorce. This immediately confused Lauren's parents, and they say it was quite an awkward revelation because he really didn't give them any further information about the prior marriage or what had happened for it to fail. Lauren's parents were primarily concerned for Lauren since she was someone who was quite traditional, and dating for her was not just a pastime. The purpose of them being together for her was a future, which included marriage. And though it definitely shook her parents, it didn't deter Lauren. She seemed to have her sights firmly set on a future with Matt. The couple got engaged in 2015, which was about a year after reconnecting, and had their wedding the following year in 2016. The pair were both huge fans of Star Wars and incorporated it into their wedding theme. From the outside looking in, it seemed like Lauren and Matthew were perfectly compatible, a perfect couple in everyone's relationship goals. Lauren was constantly posting pictures of the two of them on her Instagram as well, so all everyone saw was a happy relationship. Like these posts, quote, 6 months already, but it feels like just yesterday we had the best day of our lives, celebrating and dancing with everyone we love. This was a post on Lauren's Instagram in May, along with a photo from their wedding. She goes on, quote, although it was an amazing day, I love our days spent together the last 6 months and wouldn't take it back for anything in the world. She also wrote about Matt on Instagram on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to the best husband there could ever be. I'm so blessed to have you forever and always. God did good and knew exactly what he was doing. Our paths were perfectly planned for us to meet at the perfect time after learning the perfect lessons. I couldn't have done it better myself, she wrote. I love your fun times, silly times, and all the in-between times. Can't wait to see our future times. XO, your wife. But all was not what it seemed. What was being shown to the world via social media hid a relationship in trouble. The couple were having some problems. Number one being the fact that Matthew's mum wasn't accepting of her new daughter-in-law. In fact, she treated her quite poorly. This drove a wedge between Lauren and Matt. It had been going on since the beginning. His mother had even turned up in a white dress to the couple's engagement party. The purpose seemed to be to take attention from Lauren. In addition to his mum causing issues, Matt himself caused many problems that put a strain on his relationship with Lauren. The two of them had come from very different backgrounds, and their formative years growing up had shaped them into being quite opposite kinds of people that may struggle to get on the same page and work in creating a life together. Lauren was always a very hardworking and independent woman, and at this point in their relationship was working multiple jobs at once to help support the couple financially. She worked as an auditor for a Fortune 500 company, a daycare worker for her church, and a Sensi consultant. She was busy hustling, but Matthew didn't really like to work and had trouble keeping a job. He was constantly job hopping without much explanation as to why he left these positions or whether he had left or had been fired. These jobs were also super varied, from sales to caregiving and in the end lawn care. He seemed to just take whatever was going at the time and move on from it just as quickly. Eventually, in what seemed to be an attempt to keep their marriage afloat and impress Lauren, Matthew decided to go back to Clear Creek Baptist Bible College to become a pastor for their church. This was something that Lauren admired, and she supported his newfound direction. She thought it would be a perfect fit. They were both very active in their church, spending a lot of time there and volunteering. However, it wasn't just Matt's inconsistencies in working that put financial stress on Lauren. Matthew would also spend money that was over the couple's budget on frivolous things such as electronics and gaming equipment. He would even go to the extent of stealing money out of Lauren's savings or cash out of Lauren's purse. According to Lauren's family, Lauren had approximately $10,000 saved before getting married to Matt, and then right before her death, she only had a bit under $1,000 left in that savings account. Matt's spending habits apparently caused many fights between the couple, because beyond making day-to-day life harder, this spending was keeping them from doing things that they'd planned to do together. Like I said before, both Lauren and Matt were big fans of Star Wars and were trying to save money to go to Disney World, but every time a little bit of money was saved up for the trip, Matt would take it and spend it on himself. He seemed to have a problem waiting. He needed instant gratification, which, just as a side note, is a huge indicator of being a psychopath. Just saying. So all of that is hard enough on a new marriage. but it was also implied that Matthew may have been having an affair. Lauren and Matt had a neighbour named Valerie, and it was said that Matt would often go over and spend time with Valerie, confiding in her about his marriage and whatnot. There was one occasion, according to Lauren's sister Beth, when Lauren was talking on the phone with her as she cooked Matt's dinner, and when Matt came home from work, he said to Lauren that he was going to hang out with Valerie, and not long after he left, he texts Lauren saying, "Just eat dinner without me, I'm having way too much fun with Valerie." Yeah, he's an ass. Beth said this obviously upset Lauren, and she tried to talk to Matt about her feelings, but Matt dismissed her. He told her that she was making a big deal out of nothing. However, when Lauren had male friends, or even had conversations at church with other men, well, that was a different story. Lauren and Matt had multiple fights over jealousy because Matt was worried there was another guy at their church he thought might have feelings for Lauren. Matt's hypocritical behaviour and obsessive jealousy caused Lauren to push back against his possessiveness, but this only caused more arguments between the two. So by September 1st, 2017, Lauren was on the verge of leaving Matt because she couldn't take his controlling, irresponsible, and jealous behaviour anymore. She was working 3 jobs and they were going backwards financially. And on top of that, he was off playing with the neighbour and accusing her of being unfaithful. She'd just about had enough. Then at 1:10 a.m. on that first day of September 2017, Matthew Phelps places a 911 call. In the call, Matthew shows no emotion as he gives his address to the 911 dispatcher, who then asks, "Tell me exactly what happened." Matt then tells him, "I think I killed my," then stops and, breathing heavily, tells the dispatcher, "I had a dream and then I turned on the lights and she's dead on the floor. I have blood all over me and there's a bloody knife on the bed. And I think I did it. I can't believe this. I can't believe this." He tells the dispatcher he didn't know what time it was when he woke up to find his wife. The dispatcher asks him if he was with the patient, and he responds, "Yeah, I can see her," while seemingly beginning to get emotional. The dispatcher then asks Matt if she's awake and that what makes him think she's dead, and he responds, "She's not breathing." "Oh my God," and begins to cry. The dispatcher then asks Matt if his wife is beyond help, and he replies, "I don't know. I'm too scared to get close to her." Later in the 7-minute call, Matthew tells the dispatcher, "I took more medicine than I should have. I took Coriside and cough and cold because I know it can make you feel good. So a lot of times I can't sleep at night. I took some." When police arrived on the scene, Lauren was still alive but mortally wounded. Her body was reportedly found in the fetal position on the floor of the couple's bedroom. Lauren was rushed to hospital, where she was unfortunately pronounced dead. Around 6 a.m, Matthew was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder, and he was booked into the Wake County Jail. At that stage, the police were still investigating, but they didn't believe it was a random incident. They took a white bedspread, a white sheet, and a grey-white comforter as evidence, and several pillowcases that were all marred with an unknown red substance, as well as an empty box of Coriside and cough and cold medicine. As the investigation progressed, the autopsy found that Lauren had been stabbed 123 times. During the investigation, Matthew's friends told authorities that he quite often spoke about his obsession with American Psycho, which is a serial killer film. He also shared his fascination with the movie on social media. Matthew posted pictures of himself dressed as the American Psycho main character, Patrick Bateman, who's played by Christian Bale, to his Instagram account. Although set to private, his profile image shows a bloodied picture of Christian Bale. His Instagram account shows numerous photographs of scenes from the movie and Matt dressed as the main character. A detective wrote that Matthew expressed an interest to a friend regarding what it would be like to kill someone. Lauren's sister Beth says that the couple fought in the hours before Lauren's death, and she and her family believe that it was because Lauren had told him that she would be leaving him. That this argument and her declaration that she was going to leave decided Matthew's course of action. He wasn't going to let her leave him, even if that meant he had to kill her. Lauren had also told her family 2 months prior to her death that she'd found out that Matthew had assaulted his previous wife and lied about the reasons for their separation. So when the time of the the trial came, prosecutors described the nature of the relationship, but they also argued that Matthew knew what he was doing when he killed Lauren. This was mainly due to the fact that once they got access to Matthew's phone, they found his search history in his browser, where he'd type questions such as, how loopy does Coricidin make you? And have other people been high from Coricidin? So from looking at these Google searches, it's clear that this murder was premeditated, since he was already planning on using the cough medicine as a defense. Now, looking into the cough medicine as a defense, a toxicology report did find a measure of Coricidin cold medicine in his system the night of the killing, but not at a toxic level that would cause hallucinations. The prosecutors also presented evidence that investigators had found when forensically examining the scene. The investigators had conducted a luminol test around the couple's apartment to see if there was any of Lauren's blood that Matt had tried to clean up before the police arrived. And sure enough, they found evidence of Lauren's blood everywhere. The forensics team found blood evidence all over their bathroom, and it was clear that Matt had cleaned it up in hopes that the authorities wouldn't find it. When it came to Matt's defense, they didn't have a lot that they could work with. Their main argument was that this wasn't in Matt's character, and his reasoning for doing this was because he was in a more unstable and depressed headspace. The trial finally came to a close on October 5th, 2018, where all of Lauren's family and members of her church showed up to see Matt's sentencing and raise awareness for domestic violence. In exchange for the removal of the death penalty, Matthew Phelps took a plea of first-degree murder for the death of his 29-year-old wife, Lauren. He was sentenced to and will serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. After his sentencing, Matt apologised to Lauren's family, but they say this means nothing to them, and they cannot forgive him. Lauren's family are heartbroken and feel a sense of guilt for not intervening in Lauren and Matt's relationship when they noticed the red flags. Lauren's father, Dale, is probably hardest on himself. He says, the last time I saw my daughter, she came over looking for a 3-ring binder. She was nervous and a little edgy, and it didn't look like Lauren at all. She looked a mess. He said, I regret it now that I didn't ask questions about what was going on. Her family have said that Lauren had been subjected to emotional and physical abuse during her 10-month marriage to Matthew, and that she was too frightened to tell anybody about it, leaving Dale wondering if he could have done something more to save her life. He said that he thinks about what I did wrong, what I missed every day. I just regret not knowing or keeping my eyes open and watching. He says, I just took everything as is. And unfortunately, a lot of people do. They don't question a seemingly perfect Instagram couple or know the signs of someone who's being emotionally abused or coercively controlled. It's going on all the time, all around us. And it's something that we have to start recognizing if we're going to save our daughters, sisters, and brothers. Lauren's mother, Laurie, says, Matthew was so good at manipulating the situation. Manipulation is a huge red flag. If someone has to talk you around so you don't think poorly of them, then there's a problem. If something feels off, don't ignore your gut. I feel so terrible for the Hugelmaiers. Hindsight is 2020. How were they to know that this is how their young daughter's marriage would go? It's taken this tragedy for them to be able to see things for what they were. Please educate yourselves before you lose someone you love. Okay, I'll stop ranting. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, guys. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review, and drop a comment below for you guys watching on YouTube. Let's also continue the discussion over on social media. Join us on Twitter at LoveTrapPod or Instagram at Surviving the Love Bomb. Trapped by Love is a Surviving the Love Bomb production. If you'd like more information about recognizing abusive relationships, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, Surviving the Love Bomb. You can also watch these podcasts on the Trapped by Love YouTube channel. I believe this is a really important topic that needs more exposure, and that has been made evident once again with the tragic case of Gabby Petito, which is unfolding now. I've added a link to the Gabby Petito Foundation in the show notes and description box if you'd like to head over and check it out and make a donation. They have Justice for Gabby bracelets for sale. I just placed my order and my prayers are with the family. I can't imagine what they're going through. Well, that's all I have for you today. I thank you for joining me this week, and until next time, please take care of yourselves and be kind to one another.